Hey darts fans, that's Timo Newman here, the transporter. Welcome to the good ship on darted waters, and here we are nearing the end of this voyage, the voyage of the 3 darts. This is episode 5. It might not be the very end because there's so much that we can say about this, but this will be a wrapping up, at least for the time being, of what we've talked about so far. The 3 darts. I was a bit lucky there getting a nice 171. I've been trying for a while to get a nice shot like a 164 with the ball checkout, but in the end I decided to play it safe and have all 3 darts in the same place. But it's just a reminder that something we haven't really spoken about is switching around the board, and that will be one of the topics that we can talk about in the future under this umbrella of the 3 darts. But anyway, let me get the whiteboard, because what I want to do in this video is wrap up a lot of the concepts that we've been talking about to get the big picture. So here we go. So I've got a chart here. Speaking about big picture, here's a big chart. I hope it's not intimidating or anything, but it's really just to allow us to summarize all of the things that we have been talking about. So the way I've divided this up is we've got a column for dart 1, a column for dart 2, and a column for dart 3. And I want to indicate how, whether this is a low or a high or a medium for each dart in these categories. I think I've called them characteristics in the past in this series, but I'm calling them functions here. Okay, so this is all about the biomechanical, the visual and the mental aspects of throwing a dart and how that changes through the journey of a visit, dart 1, dart 2 and dart 3. And these will all be familiar terms to folks that have been watching this series. If you're jumping into the series on video 5, it probably will sound like a lot of kind of jiggery-pokery or hokum-pokum. So what I would suggest is to maybe go back from the beginning, and then you'll be able to see how we've kind of grown into being quite comfortable speaking about these various terms, okay? So let me start then with dart 1. And we were speaking about this in terms of a brain model, the brain of the dart player and that model, but I'm just going to summarize on this chart what that model was telling us. So for dart 1 then, what we were speaking about was long-term muscle memory was high. So I'll put H for high here. And from the visual side, basically there was aiming going on because you just have this blank dartboard in front of you. And for that first dart, you're relying on your long-term muscle memory and you're aiming. Okay? And your mental state is not in a flow state because it's the very beginning of your visit. You're in a focus state. You're focusing very much on a target. Remember I spoke about how your eyes might kind of burn a hole through the dartboard when you watch Phil Taylor. I don't know, something about Phil Taylor's eyes when he was throwing. You'd feel like they were laser beams. So it's a very high focus state for this first dart. Okay. And what we would say then, I think, for dart 1 is that if we look at these other functions within the mechanical, the short-term muscle memory would be low. All right? The only time it wouldn't be low, really, is if you've got 2 very rapid players, like if Ricky Evans is playing Josh Rock, very, very rapid turnover. You would only have to wait maybe, I don't know, is it like 40 or 50 seconds to have your next turn? And so there would be some lingering short-term muscle memory. But remember, you've had to walk around, collect your darts, go to the back of the oche, stand around and walk back. So a lot of that sensory muscle memory will have dissipated, but there'll be some residual. But generally this is very low for that first dart. And likewise, that sensory mental sort of surveillance of muscles will also be very low. So there's a feedback loop hiding in here, but that feedback loop is essentially turned off for the first dart. Likewise with the visual, because you're throwing at a blank board, there's no calibration going on and there's no adaptation. The adaptation of having to adjust to something you've never seen before. So these are both very, very low, essentially off really. And as I said, you're not really in a flow state, you're in a focus state at that point. Okay. Now, Dart 3 is the one that we covered after Dart 1, and it's really easy on this chart to do Dart 3 because it's just all opposites, I think, pretty much. So for Dart 3 then, I'm just going off camera here, I'm just at the side. The primary mechanical systems now are short-term muscle memory, relying on input from this sensory feedback loop. So this feedback loop is fully operational, and long-term muscle memory is just in the background. Okay, so that's just low. In your visual field, you might say, well, I am still aiming on the third dart, but by aiming here, what we really mean is kind of absolute aiming, and the calibration is then the relative aiming, where you're adjusting. So you're more in a calibration state on that third dart, not in an absolute aiming state. And again, because there are two darts in the dartboard, often in places that you've never seen them before exactly, your visual cortex is doing a lot of computation unconsciously to adapt to that new visual field. So that will be high. And when these two are high and these two are high, what that means is two feedback loops are fully operational, okay? And the state on the third dart, as long as you are not a very slow player, if you pause for literally a minute in between darts, you're pretty much in a focus state mentally, and the mechanical feedback loop is switched off. The visual feedback loop is always on. I mean, you can't really not see, you know, but this one will have died away. But I'm assuming here for players that essentially throw their darts, you know, within a, let's say, between 3 and 10 seconds, then these two feedback loops are fully operational and you are in a flow state on that third dart, and the focus state is pretty much switched off at that point. So that's really a summary on this chart of all the things that we have spoken about using that brain model. Now, Dart 2 was the last one that I covered, and you can see why, because on this chart it's very clear that Dart 3 is really the opposite of Dart 1, but Dart 2 is an uneasy hybrid of the two. And I think the easiest thing to say about Dart 2 really would be to just put a medium in all of the boxes. I mean, that would be kind of an easy thing to write down. And it seems like a cop-out, but I think what I mean by putting mediums here is that you can't make a generic statement about Dart 2. I think it's very dependent on each individual player. All right, some players will have a second dart that's more like the third dart, and some players will have a second dart that's more like the first dart. It really depends on timescales. How quickly do you enter into a flow state? If you are gradually approaching a flow state through your visit, then your second dart is really probably got more of the focus element to it than the flow element, and it's got a lot of first dart characteristics, although in the visual field it will have the calibration and adaptation, so it will have sort of third dart characteristics visually but first dart characteristics mentally. On the other hand, if you're someone who enters the flow state almost instantaneously after the first dart, then your second dart is pushed way to the right and it's much more like a third dart in terms of flow and this sensory feedback loop. So I hope that's a helpful way just to summarize our brain model of the three darts and how you essentially go on this journey from first dart to transition dart to final dart where you're fully in flow. And again, this is pretty much written down for the case where you're in a scoring part of the game where you're aiming your three darts at the same target. If you are, say, instead of me doing that 171, if I was trying to get a 164 checkout, which I was trying to do but I couldn't do it, kept hitting the 25, and I just got I thought that third dart was better off in there. But obviously then if you're switching, then you're sort of semi-exiting the flow state. You definitely have to refocus. You know, it's not a relative focus anymore. It's like a kind of an absolute focus. But I think everyone would agree who's played darts for a while that that third dart, even if you have to switch targets, if you're in kind of flow, it's sort of magic happens, that you just feel this kind of joy and a buzz, and very often that dart will go in an entirely different target. And I think you see that with the professionals, that when they're fully in flow, they sort of can't miss. You know, I'm reminded of Michael Smith in his heyday. Hopefully he'll get his heyday back. Big fan of Michael Smith. I don't think he'll ever watch this video, but in case he does, Michael Smith, I hope that you get your form back, my friend. You're a terrific asset to the darting world, and when Michael Smith is in full flow, it is a magician in operation. He's quite a rapid player, and he is very comfortable switching around the board, you know. One final thing that might require really another video in the future is about long time scales. So what do I mean by long time scales? Not the time scale of a visit or the time scale of a leg or even the time scale of an entire match, but I'm thinking time scale of days is another feedback loop that we haven't spoken about. Okay, we've spoken about the feedback loop in the visual field, okay, which is short term, the feedback loop in the mechanical, sensory parts of the body, but there's a beautiful feedback loop going on here, which is between the short-term muscle memory and the long-term muscle memory, because ultimately, this is kind of obvious, but maybe not obvious at the same time, but where does our long-term muscle memory come from? It comes from playing darts. So that flow state, particularly when I think when the body is really humming and the unconscious, in a sense, I mean, I'm sort of making this up now, I don't know if this is really true, but the unconscious, if things are going really well, I would imagine the unconscious then switches on some kind of flow into long-term muscle memory. Like, this is so good, we have to capture it. Like, this is how it's meant to be. Unconsciously, let's capture this and build up long-term muscle memory of a very productive form. Whereas if you're having a dart session where things aren't going very well, there's not really much flow, everything's frustrating, everything hurts, I don't think your unconscious is going to build up long-term muscle memory from that. It's going to want to just junk all of that because it's actually very damaging to your long-term muscle memory. So maybe that's worth another video in the future. And of course, really happy to get feedback from the viewers on this, what their thoughts are about that final feedback loop, about how do we actually inform our long-term muscle memory. And it would be fun to sort of put that into our brain model. So with that, my friends, this is the conclusion for now of the 3 darts, not the 3 bears or the 3 blind mice, but the 3 darts. And what's coming up soon, possibly in the next week, is Timo Newman playing darts. I'm going to get these 2 cameras finally sorted out properly, and I'm going to talk about technique, stance, action, grip, all of the nitty gritty, and as long as my hands aren't too cold, hopefully play some decent darts as well. So with that, we get 3 darts at the oche, make them count. I hope you're all doing well. All the best, and I'll see you next time.